Hi everyone, my name is Илья and my talk is about setting up well-performing WordPress installation. Few words about me. So, that thing doesn't work. Okay, so a few words about me. I live in Bulgaria and I work as a systems wrangler in Automatic. Most of my time I spend dealing with the server-side part of WordPress.com, optimizing its performance and reliability. You can find me on my blog or on Twitter. This talk is going to have lots of links, commands, and configuration options. So I'm going to publish the slides afterwards on SlideShare, so you don't have to really remember anything right now. I want to take some time to walk you through the essential components of the WordPress setup, optimizing these components, and optimizing WordPress itself. On WordPress.com, we have the largest WordPress installation in the world. Here are some numbers that illustrate what we do there. We serve up to 115 million page views a day, which amounts to 2.6 billion requests, and each page generation loads over 200 plugins with an average page generation time of about 500 milliseconds. We also have quite a few notable users on our platform, like TechCrunch, CNN, NBC, and so on. I'm going to walk you through the installation of the services. If you are on a shared host, you probably already have these things set up for you. So the first thing we need is a web server. From our experience on WordPress.com, what works best for us is the combination of Nginx plus PHP FPM. Actually, one of our main goals last year was to switch everything on our environment to Nginx. It uses an efficient event-driven model, as opposed to having to create new processes or new threads for every new connection. It also has quite a small memory footprint, and it's very flexible and customizable. We use it as a load balancer. We do caching with it. We use it as a web server. And recently, we have been donating to help make it even more awesome. I would recommend going with the latest version, and the installations page has a pretty decent instruction on how to get it running. PHP FPM is a PHP server. It will read the PHP requests from the Nginx and execute them. It's also very efficient, and it's included in the PHP source. So if you're compiling PHP on your own, you can switch it on with the enable FPM flag. In case you're running Debian, you can just use the commands on the slides to make the installations. The next thing we are going to set up is APC, or Alternative PHP Caching. This is a PHP extension that will cache compile the PHP code. So instead of having for each request to read the PHP, understand what it needs to do, we will just do that once and use the cached version afterwards. This is going to save us quite a bit of CPU work and also disk operations. We will install MySQL to use as a database backend, and memcached.d to cache them expensive to generate data. You can also use the installation links to set them up, or if you're on Debian, the commands shown will get you running. Once we are done with the installations, we can move on to the Nginx configuration. There are a few values we want to change from the defaults in order to optimize its performance. The first thing is we want to adjust the number of Nginx processes we want to run. Usually, the number of CPU cores on your server will be good enough. And we want to increase the number of connections allowed per process so that we can accommodate for the higher traffic we want to handle. We want to enable keep alive so that the browsers don't have to make multiple requests, multiple connections for each request. For example, for the CSS files of your site, for the JavaScript, it will be able to just make one connection and push all the requests through it. As Chris talked earlier, we want to enable gzip compression and the expired headers. They will both save us traffic and additional requests in the case of the expired headers. It's important that you invalidate the caches, as he mentioned, after updating these files. Otherwise, you will be serving old content. And the next thing we want to increase is the fast CGI buffers, which will save some, they will allow Nginx to process more requests in memory instead of having to buffer them to the disk. The last thing is we could add the ulimit directive in the Nginx init script so that it is allowed to keep open all the connections we want to be able to handle at the same time. You can find an example of how the full configuration will look like on my blog. It also has some configurations for the caching plugin we will be setting up later, so you would probably need that. The next thing we are going to configure is PHP, FPM, and APC. The most important things in PHP, FPM is to allow it to run more children. The way it works is that one child can process only one request at a time. So if we allow 40 children to run, we can you can process 40 PHP requests at the same time, and all the other requests will wait for a free slot. How many free slots we can have, how many clients can wait, is determined by the listen backlog value. So we might want to increase that one as well. For the APC, we need to make sure it is enabled and it has enough memory. Usually the default of 32 megabytes should be enough for a single WordPress installation. But in case your code base grows or you have multiple installations on your server, you might want to increase that as well. Ideally, we will have all the PHP code compiled and cached in the APC. When both adjusting the number of children and adjusting the memory of APC, we should be careful to leave enough memory for the server to operate normally. Otherwise, we might run into performance issues, or it might even crash. We also want to enable the output buffering in PHP INI so that we can send the replies to our clients in less but bigger packages, which is usually much more efficient. For the MySQL configuration, there isn't any fixed recipe on how to optimize it to work best. But basically, because that depends on the available RAM on your server, your workload, the size of your databases, and the number of tables. But there are a few configuration values you can change, which will most definitely improve the performance of your MySQL. The first thing is the buffers and the in-memory tables. Both will offload the work. They will allow MySQL to do more work in memory instead of doing it on the disks, which is usually a lot slower. And we also might want to increase the table and the thread caches so that it doesn't have to constantly reopen tables or recreate new threads. And usually the query caching will save us some queries and give us some performance boost. My WordPress by default comes with MyISAM as an engine, and while MyISAM does table level locking, it might be not that efficient for tables that get both lots of writes and lots of reads at the same time, like WP commands. And we would probably benefit from switching these tables to InnoDB, which does row level locking. The MySQL Debian package has this cool utility called MySQL report, which will show you some important status variables, which will show you the usage of the above optimizations, and you can adjust them accordingly. Once we are done with the configurations, we can move on to the famous WordPress 5-minute installer. Few things about the installation. We want to keep it always up to date, because with the new versions, we not only get new features and security fixes, we often get some performance optimizations as well. We want to avoid all the plugins that we don't use, just disable them, because otherwise they will load unnecessarily with each request. And we want to avoid all the slow plugins. GoDaddy have developed this plugin called P3 Profiler, which can test your plugins and give you some cool stats and graphs on how well each of them performs, so you can make decisions based on that. The next step is to set up some caching. I'm going to recommend you two plugins. The first one is memcached Object Cache. It's developed by Ryan Boren from Automatic. What it does is it implements the WordPress Object Cache using memcached as a backend, which means the cache we have will be persistent between the requests. And when our installation grows, we have larger databases and plugins that do a bunch of remote requests and stuff. This will provide us with a quite big performance improvement. The next thing we need is WP Supercache. As Chris mentioned, it's similar to the W3 Total Cache. It will generate static content out of the dynamic content of your site. And serving static content is like very much more efficient than serving dynamic content. So this plugin will provide us with the biggest performance optimization. It will require some custom permalinks. You can install it through the WP admin. And it's a good idea to enable all the recommended settings there. I have done some benchmarks to illustrate what the performance boost of the caching plugins is. With APC, we get about 4 times improvement, and enabling the caching plugins, we get like 370 times more improvement. And I was able to actually serve 16,000 requests on a virtual machine on my laptop. Just to give you an idea how the setup will look on more servers, we can add more web servers and put them behind a load balancer, which will distribute the requests between the web servers. We can offload the database by adding more databases and setting them up in a master-slave replication. And we can also move mcached to a separate server and add some caching layer between the web server and the load balancers. And this is actually a simplified version of what we do on WordPress.com, and it works pretty well for us. I think this is everything I wanted to share. I have a few minutes for questions if you have any. And if you want to dig into some configuration specifics, I will be outside the room afterwards for additional discussion. So yeah, that's it.
You didn't mention Varnish. Where does that fit into that application?
Well, in this case, with that setup, if we're serving our request from static files, it will be probably as efficient as Varnish, because it really depends on the number of pages you have to generate on the size of the site. But when we serve pages from static files, they are practically served from memory, because WordPress has to read them from the disk. When they are read from the disk, they end up in the file system cache, which is in memory. And this would be probably almost as efficient as having them as in Varnish memory. And this is only on one server, so it's better not to, we don't really need to add too much additional services when we're doing setup on one server, because that will increase the context switches. And if it's not really required, you can just skip that. But otherwise, Varnish works well. In a larger configuration, you can use that, although in our experience, we had some problems when Varnish needed to cache stuff to the disk. So as long as all your stuff fits in memory, it's fine to use it. And it might be like the newer versions might be better right now. This was some time ago.
I've heard lots of wonderful things about WP Supercache. I'm never able to get that to work with BuddyPress. Does that supposed to work with BuddyPress?
What was supposed? Sorry.
WP Supercache.
Oh, honestly, I don't know about BuddyPress. It should work. Honestly, I can't say for sure.
Go down to the happiness bar in the break and ask for one of the BuddyPress. There's like 3 BuddyPress wizards around here today.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
go ask for one of them.
Is there a negative performance issue with deactivated plugins? If you had 100 plugins in your repository, but they're all deactivated, is there an impact there?
If they are deactivated, they are actually not loaded. So there won't be any performance degradation. One of the things we do on WordPress.com is that we automatically load the plugins. So we don't have configuration in the database that says when the WordPress starts, you should load these plugins. But we scan the plugins directory. So there we have this problem. But in a default installation, you won't have that. If they are disabled, they are just not loaded, and they are not statted. They're just not used. So it's fine. Okay.
Just a quick response to your question. If you have 100 plugins, the performance hit that you'll get is in MySQL. If it has like if it dumps a bunch of junk in the WP options table, it will decrease in performance. So it's best to clean that out if you're not using them.
Yeah, that's true. Although with the memcached object cache, you will have that in the cache, and you wouldn't have to make database queries for it. So it won't be a huge deal.
So what is the way, is there a way to determine the optimal size of the APC cache from like looking at your code base?
Yes. The APC supports few functions that you can use as PHP code. I think the PHP function was APC cache info. And it will basically print you all your current APC usage, like all the files that you have in the cache, all the variables that you have there, how much slots are used, and how much free memory you have. There are also some other cool functions related to APC, which you can see on php.net. But usually, this is the best way to determine how much is your usage. Ideally, if you don't use APC for storing data, only the PHP compiled files, they wouldn't take more than the size of your PHP files. So the default of 32 megabytes it's quite a bit.
I'm over here on your left.
Okay, hi.
Hi, I'm Peter from Modern Tribe. I recently followed Evan Solomon's instructions to set up something quite like what you just described here.
Okay.
And it's awesome. It works great. I'm curious if you could talk a little more about bat cache versus WP super cache, and also if you could remind me where I could find your notes that you went over.
Oh, yeah, I have something. Here, SlideShare, VN Savage. Bat cache uses, this is actually what we use on WordPress.com. We use bat cache. And the main difference is that bat cache, well, it works better for us. It also does the same as WP super cache. It caches generated pages. Although with bat cache, they are cached in memcached. So in a distributed environment, where we have almost 30 million sites, we can't really generate static files on the file system for each site, on each server. So it is more efficient for us to have it in memcached, where it's distributed on more memcached and specialized servers that have that content. And also with the bat cache, you have to make TCP connection or Unix connection to get stuff from the cache, while with super cache, you can just read them from the file system.
Thank you.
OK, thank you.